Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Writers Workshop. So our topic tonight is hooking your readers, and I am pleased to welcome back local mystery author Molly MacRae.
Well, thank you all for coming, and thank you, Solemn, for having me here again. As she said, I write mysteries, mysteries for adults. Someday I'd like to write mysteries for children as well, but for right now I'm sort of stuck in a rut. My 21st novel just came out in June, and I'm about to start number 22. And just like anybody starting a book, it's tough. It's like, it doesn't matter that I've written 21 other books. It's hard to start that book each single time. It's the fear of the blank page. It's how you're going to, when you're going to start it, how you're going to, what your hook is going to be. So that's what we'll talk about tonight. And just so you know, don't be afraid. Everyone goes through the fear of getting the hook right. How many of you, what kinds of things do you write? Are you fiction or nonfiction or poetry or?
I just started coming to this, so.
Okay.
Anything I write is for nobody to read.
That's the way to start. You write for yourself. Is anyone writing short stories? Cool. Okay. Nonfiction. Anyone doing nonfiction? Because for nonfiction these days, you need to have a hook too. You know, an article in the newspaper is going to start out with a great first sentence so that it drags you in. Hooking our readers from the very first page not only sounds like a good idea, it is a good idea. So tonight I'm going to tell you why hooking your reader is a good idea. I'll share some examples of good hooks, and we'll talk about what goes into a good hook and how you can write one. And we'll talk about where else you can use good hooks, because it's not just on that first page. Okay, why do we need to hook writers from the very first page? As Abraham Lincoln didn't say, you can hook some of the readers all of the time and all of the readers some of the time, but you cannot hook all of the readers all of the time. But you do need to try to hook them. If you can't hook any readers ever, then your story is just a piece of paper, you know? Readers exist in circles. Actually, I left this out of my outline. The hook, a way to look at the hook. The hook is a great big, and then what? You know those stories that a good storyteller just grabs you, and they'll pause, and you'll think, well, then what? Then what happened? That's what a hook is. You want your hook to have that reader saying, and then what? But your readers exist in circles. The first circle is friends and friendly relatives. That's your inner circle. And they're likely to like everything you write. They're pushovers. So if you ask them to critique your hook or your entire piece, you can't be sure that it really is any good. Sad to say. It's just the nature of friends and relatives. They like you, and they don't want to upset you, for the most part. I'm sure there are relatives and friends out there who would be happy to tell you how awful your stuff is, too. I don't have any like that. Okay. Another circle is your critique group. Members of a critique group are valuable if they're being honest. But again, it depends on your critique group. A critique group might be made up of people who are also very kind which is good. Kind to the point of not letting you know the truth, though. They might act more like friends, or they might be out to prove themselves. Something to remember is that anyone can tell you how to rewrite your stuff. Anyone. And that doesn't mean they're right. A rule of thumb is that if, say, out of this group, one person told you, you ought to change that, but everyone else says, it's fine. Listen to yourself or the rest of them. If most of the people in the group say, this passage is a little iffy, or that hook really could be stronger, that's an indication that maybe it could be stronger. In the end, though, you always have to listen to yourself or to the person that you're trying to sell a piece to, an editor of an anthology, an agent. Because anyone can tell you how to rewrite your stuff. I belonged to a critique group, a lovely critique group back in Tennessee, before my first short story was published. We started out with a slightly larger group, which didn't work very well because there was a lot of tension between a couple of the guys. We got down to 5. There were 5 of us, 3 women, 2 men, and oddly enough, we were all exactly the same height. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but it was a great group. We would write our stuff, and a couple of weeks before we would meet, we would send our stuff. We didn't have email. This was back a long time ago. We would take all our stuff to Jim's office, and everyone else would go pick it up from Jim's office. So you had something of everyone. And then we'd read it and critique it, and we'd meet and go over the stuff. So I had a story that I wanted them to look at, but between getting it to them and having the meeting, the story was accepted by Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine, which was a total thrill. But I didn't tell the group right away because I wanted to hear what they had to say about it. And each one of them had something to say about it, which was valid, except that it really didn't need any of those changes because I had sold it. And they were a little annoyed when I told them I'd sold it after they'd told me all their critiques. But it was a valuable lesson for all of us that anyone can tell you how to rewrite your stuff. And you have to listen to yourself and listen to the people you're trying to sell to if you're trying to sell something. A good critique group, though, is encouraging and honest. An iffy group can be demoralizing and depressing. Okay, the third circle is agents and editors. They're not out there to be your friend. That's they're out there to, well, the common wisdom is that they are out there to find a reason to reject your stuff. That's kind of the depressing part of it. They get so many submissions, they don't have to read more than the first page sometimes, or they won't. That's sad to say. So your hook is so important because you don't want to give them a reason to say no. So let's look at some examples of good hooks. This is from 3 Graves Full by Jamie Mason. This is the first line. There is very little peace for a man with a body buried in his backyard. Or this is from a short story by Margaret Atwood called, which I forgot to write down. I don't remember. It's 3 words long. 1 word and thirst, and I don't remember what the first word is, but the first 2 sentences are, "We could push them out of windows," says Leonie. "Oh, I don't think so," says Chrissy. everyone would say it was Russians. And then this is an old one. This is from True Grit. This is the first 2 sentences. It's long, but it's only 2 sentences. True Grit by Charles Portis. People do not give it credence that a 14-year-old girl could leave home and go off in the wintertime to avenge her father's blood, but it did not seem so strange then, although I will say it did not happen every day. I was just 14 years of age when a coward going by the name of Tom Cheney shot my father down in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and robbed him of his life and his horse and $150 in cash, plus 2 California gold pieces that he carried in his trouser band. And in just those 2 sentences, we know exactly who that character is, what she's up to. We don't know her name yet, but we know what's happened, what she plans to do, that this is unusual, that she's unusual. Ed Park, a critic, said Maddie's is a steadfast, unsentimental voice, and Portis's sublime ventriloquism maintains such purity of purpose that the prose seems engraved rather than merely writ. Well, that might be exaggerating a little bit, but you do know exactly what's going to happen, or you do know you are hooked. So your good hook will invite the reader in, or drag the reader in, or offer your reader a secret, or make your reader nervous, because nervous readers are engaged readers. Mystery writer Susan Van Kirk says, she's quoting, that's cut off slightly. She's quoting T.S. Eliot in the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Do I dare disturb the universe? And Susan's answer, she's a mystery writer, is heck yeah, because in a mystery, you need to disturb the universe. And in a traditional mystery or a cozy mystery, you then reorient the universe at the end and put everything right. That doesn't happen in a noir mystery. It doesn't always happen in literary fiction either. Sometimes it's a very sad ending. But your job as the writer is to disturb the universe of your story, your characters. Your job is to get the reader to say, and then what? It's often easier to explain what you shouldn't do in writing, and that's helpful, but also awfully negative. So here are a few suggestions for what you can do. Jerome Stern, in the book Writing Shapely Fiction, says, tension is the mother of fiction. When tension and immediacy combine, the story begins. So here are two ways to combine tension and immediacy. Start with dialogue, because it puts us in the middle of a scene. That's what happened with the Margaret Atwood story. We could push them out of windows. Oh, I don't think so. Everyone would say it was Russians. There you are in the middle of a very odd dialogue, and that story is really, really good. It's, she wrote it and sold it through Amazon. It's one of Amazon's shorts, so you can look for it. It's her newest story, came out this year. The dialogue can be between characters, like Leonie and Chrissy, or it can be an interior dialogue inside one person's head, like Maddie. What was the other? That first example, the one about the man with the grave in his backyard, That's the narrator's voice. So that's kind of a dialogue. You could also start with someone in motion, because people in motion are more interesting. People in motion make you wonder where they're going or what they're up to. The negative stuff, excuse me, I'm getting old. My voice is getting very old. The negative stuff, though, the stuff that you should avoid doing, it always sounds so negative, it stems from the rules. And there are lots of rules out there for writing. The biggest rule is that there really are no rules, or that you need to know the rules so that then you know how to break them. Elmore Leonard, author of 48 novels, had a famous rule about never starting a story talking about the weather. Well, Maddie kind of did. She said it was wintertime. Ian Rankin, a fabulous mystery writer from Scotland, started the book Let It Bleed this way. It's just one very short sentence that isn't even really a complete sentence. A winter night screaming out of Edinburgh. It's like, ugh. It really makes you wonder what's going on. Or here's one, also starting with weather. On the tail of a hurricane, half drowned in the chaos of whirlwind, deluge, thunder, and lightning, I washed up on Ocracoke Island. That's the first line in my novel that came out in June. So yeah, you can start a story with the weather, but if you do it with a purpose, to set the scene, to drag people in, not just as a placeholder. Do it in a way that shows something is happening. Would you like to sit closer? You won't bother anyone. You can move up if you want. Okay. Speaking of something happening, another rule is to never start with backstory. Do you know what I mean by backstory? Okay, you looked as though you might have a question. Do you know what backstory is? Yeah, okay. It's kind of an odd thing to say because many stories do start with backstory. Yeah, so it's another rule that you can break. But some backstory will bog a story down. They'll just bog things down. But it isn't always the case. Just like you can start a story with the weather. Maddie gave some backstory. It was just one line, but that's backstory. So there are ways of weaving backstory into your narrative that avoids the passive preamble that makes people want to say, get on with it, instead of, and then what? We probably all know people who tell stories and they start out and it sounds like it's going to be good and then they just get bogged down. Oh, but let me tell you, and by the time they get around to the actual story, you feel like putting your head down on the table or banging it against the wall. It's like, get on with it. So you don't want to do that. If you start with backstory, make it short and as elegant as Portis does in True Grit. In that one sentence, Maddie gives all the backstory you need to hook you. More backstory will come, but you're ready for it. The way he does it makes you patient to hear more farther along. There's no need to dump everything up front. So to avoid the backstory dump, ask yourself, when does your story start? Not where, but when. Start on the day or the hour that something's different. Backstory that is useless might be, I got up in the morning and I brushed my teeth and I ate a bowl of cereal and I fed the cat and I took the dog for a walk. But what really happened maybe happened while you were taking the dog for a walk, and so you start there. Because you want to set up an expectation of action, a story to come. So ask yourself, what is it you want readers to see when they walk into your story? When I started Come Shell or High Water, I wanted people to see the main character arriving all discombobulated on the tail end of a hurricane and feeling as though she'd washed up on the island. The next sentence says, well, I didn't really wash up on the island, but you get the feeling something has happened. Portis wants you to see 14-year-old Maddie, an amazing girl. So think about, what do you want readers to see? Here's something that a friend of mine, Barbara Ross, another mystery writer, said recently, and I thought this was really interesting. Avoid distancing words. So she gives this example of a paragraph. I wondered what he was doing down by the dock by himself. My mind reeled at the idea he might be guilty. I believed him to be a good man. His reputation alone placed him above suspicion. I'd known him a long time. I thought he was my friend. And she says there's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, it's the kind we've read things like that before. And that's why the words unspool easily from our minds when we're writing things like that, she says. But most of the books we've read that style in are older. Modern commercial fiction is most often written in a very close point of view. And that is good information for nonfiction as well. So she rewrites that paragraph this way. Oh, well, first what she's saying, the distancing words are wondered, believed, my mind, idea, might, and thought, because they place distance between the point of view character and the narrative, and between the narrative and the reader. You probably don't use those words when you're talking to yourself in your head. Some of us might. See? So try this instead. Jack was alone by the dock. Did he kill Esme? No. He was a good man with a solid reputation. More than that, he was my friend. That's much more immediate and much more gripping. Although I like old novels too, and there is a place for distancing as well. Some very good books are written with distancing, and that might be, it's a technique. Michael Bracken, who's published well over 1,000 short stories, this guy is incredible, said this when I asked him a simple question, what's a good hook? Or how do you start a short story? It's not really a simple question, it's just simple to write. He says, I wish there were a simple answer to this question, one that applied to every writer and every story, but there isn't. I try to start with something that will catch a reader's attention, and I try to start with an opening image that sets the tone for the story and an event that serves as the catalyst that sets the story in motion. So those are two important things, an opening image and an event that serves as a catalyst. To go back to my book that came out in June, because that's freshest in my head, the image is someone washing up after a hurricane, and in the next few sentences after that, there's the event that provides the catalyst, but you don't see that in that first line. But Michael Bracken goes on to say, for example, a recent story begins with a paragraph describing a woman standing in the rain at her husband's grave, who is lost in her memories of him. And the reader feels the woman's loss. And the second paragraph is a line of dialogue. And the dialogue is this: I know who done it. And this is the catalyst, because the woman has thought that her husband died in an accident, but we soon learned that the person who spoke that line of dialogue is a little boy who says he knows who killed him, who killed her husband. So he sets the tone, and then he provides the catalyst. And he says some stories require a little more setup before the catalyst. That could be a little bit of backstory, or a little more introduction to characters so that you have some idea what's going on, because you don't want someone to be totally at sea. Some can start with a catalyst, but both need to occur as soon as possible. There's a rule of thumb that isn't a rule of thumb, because there are no rules of thumb, that in a mystery, you should try to get the body on the first page. Well, of course, that's baloney. You can have the body successfully on page 100, but you have to have enough else going on to drag the person into the story. It doesn't have to be a dead body necessarily. Bracken goes on to say, unless there's an overriding reason to do otherwise, I aim to establish the tone and provide the catalyst within the first 1 to 5 paragraphs. And that goes along with some information that I learned back in Texas 40 years ago, that you should look at your story with this in mind. First of all, you can write your story, get it all down, and then go back and change it, fix it. So you don't feel as though you have to be stuck on getting that hook before you go anywhere else. But when you've got your story, a draft of your story, look at it and see if readers will be pulled in within the first 50 words. And will the story hold their interest? 50 words isn't a lot, but that's a helpful benchmark. Will the readers have some idea about what's happening within the first 2 paragraphs, even if that changes as the story develops? And that, again, that's a good rule of thumb. The main thing is to get the action going. One of Michael Bracken's most recent stories is in this anthology called Murder Neat. And I'll read the first 2 sentences and see if you think this lives up to what he was talking about. Donnie Brewster slapped a crisp $5 bill on the bar and said, "Give me a Jack and Coke." I pushed the 5 back. "I can't. Your brother said to stop serving you." I kept reading the story, but I don't think it's a home run for those first 2 sentences, because not everyone can have a home run every single time. But it certainly does set up questions in your mind, and that's what you want your hook to do. Why has his brother said not to serve him anymore? I'd like to know. And I found out. It was a good story. So just to scare you a little, every part of a story does need attention. First lines of paragraphs need to be good too. And each chapter, if you're writing a book, each chapter can use a hook too at the beginning. But one way to get a hook for the next scene or the next chapter is to end the previous scene or chapter with a cliffhanger or a question. It could be a literal question, or it could just be a question in a character's mind. You want your readers to say just one more page, one more chapter. You want to torture them so they stay up all night. We did that page. But with so much writing on that hook and the first paragraph and the first page, fear of the blank page can set in. Even John Steinbeck said every single time he sat down to write a short story, he didn't know how to write a short story. So it happens. But what do? You start somewhere. You don't have to start with the perfect first line. Or you might start with what you think is a perfect first line, and a little bit further along, you realize, oh, no, the story actually starts here. And then you can use that other stuff, weave it in somewhere else, or just forget it. There's an awful lot of writing that just happens in your head or happens in notes that you take before you write that doesn't have to translate directly into your story. It helps you. It helps the process inside your head. It helps the characters who are up there doing their own thing, which they do. Some writers will say that their characters talk to them and tell them what's going on. Mine don't do that. They talk to each other. And I just eavesdrop. That's probably easier. When we moved here from Tennessee, after living in Tennessee for almost 20 years, and this is more than 20 years ago now that we moved here, for the first 4 months or so, my characters were totally silent. It was a shock to move away from where we'd lived for so long, and I guess they were just getting used to the new place, but I didn't hear them, and I didn't know anyone except, my immediate family, and so I didn't hear anyone even say my name for 4 months. It was weird. But then the characters woke up again, and they started talking again to each other, which was great. If you have trouble writer's block can be real. There are ways to get through it though, because, for instance, Solemn probably never suffers from librarian block. She doesn't say, oh, I can't do anything right now, I have librarian block. And plumbers don't usually have plumber's block. So yes, writer's block is real, but there are ways to get around it. And one way I've found is if I don't know where the story's going, I write a letter to the main character or one of the other characters and ask them what's going on. And then they write a letter back to me. And of course, that's just me doing it, but it's very cool. It actually frees things up. And sometimes I can use some of that information because they'll tell me what they're thinking or what might be happening further on. And sometimes it's just a way of putting my pencil on the paper and writing. So the good news is that you don't need to write the first sentence or the first paragraph first, not if that paralyzes you. Writers often get partway into a piece or finish it and think they're done with it, and someone else comes along, an editor, a good critique partner, and says, you know what? It picks up, the story really starts at chapter 2. It's like you have to work through that first little bit to get yourself into it, and then chapter 2 is where it really takes off because that's where something different happens. Turns out all that chapter 1 or the first several pages, that was you getting into the story and might not have been backstory, but it was not active stuff that you needed to do. So sit down and write, and it doesn't matter. You can always cut off that first bit, or you might be writing the very best immediately, and that's fine too. You might get done, you might have the perfect first sentence, but by the time you get done, you might realize that there is a better first sentence that will then connect somehow to the last sentence. So give it a little bit of a twist. There's nothing wrong with going back and changing things, or change the last sentence. The fun thing is that you can just keep rewriting, but at some point you got to stop. I don't know if there are any more slides. Nope, okay, didn't think so. So you aren't going to please everyone with your hook, but in general you want a sentence, a paragraph, a page that makes readers hold on to that book or story and keep reading. So that's about it in a nutshell, and now you can go out and disturb the universe. Do you have questions? Yeah.
You said that my question is, do you ever start a story and chart the denouement, the climax?
I do. I do. There are pantsers, people who write from the seat of their pants, and there are plotters, people who like to plot. And then there are plantsters. It's an organic sort of plotting, and that's what I am. I love a good outline, but it gives me wiggle room. There are people who will say, if I write an outline, if I plot my story, then by the time I get around to writing it, it bores me because I know it's going to happen. But they'll sit down and write a first draft and then go back and fix the first draft. It's the same thing as a plot. The plot just happens to be a really, really, really rough first draft. Because same thing, at the end of the first draft that they wrote, they know what happened. So, but they're not bored going back and rewriting. It's just kind of the same thing. There are some formulas about when things should happen in certain types of books. And you can draw peaks and valleys. And then some people describe it as a road map, and you have obstacles in your way, and an obstacle should come at page 25, one should come at 75, and and that's all flexible. There's one that does it by however many thousand of words, or like a quarter of the way through, you should be, this kind of thing should happen. A third of the way through, this kind of thing should happen. That gives you wiggle room for however many pages you've got. And I've tried using that as a rough guide, and usually by the time I'm halfway through, I say, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it's working just the way it's supposed to. But, that's, everybody has their own way of writing. But I also, I'll keep an Excel spreadsheet of chapters and characters and plot points to make sure that I don't forget a character. Or, I introduce a character in chapter 2 and turns out that's the villain and never heard of from again. Or if I want crows or seagulls to be some kind of a symbol, they've got to be shown a little bit throughout. They can't just suddenly jump in at the end. Or you can use it the other way too. If I realize, this character only shows up in 2 places, do I really need that character? So maybe not. Yeah, I keep lots of Excel spreadsheets.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
You write primarily mystery, but and being within a genre, you sort of, I
probably become familiar with those ebbs and flows and what's expected.
Yeah.
You know what sells in a sense.
Yeah.
Right?
One would hope,
How
yeah.
to formulaic in some
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah, you hate to say, 'cause no one wants to be formulaic, but yeah, it's kind of,
But
it's kind of,
it is.
yeah.
Like, James Patterson has a way of writing that works for him.
Right, and I write cozy / traditional mysteries, and yes, something happens to disturb the universe, and an investigation follows, and order is restored. Formula.
Sure.
Yeah.
I am not very interested in genre, and I wondered if you can comment at all about the literary side of things and how, I mean, obviously a hook is a hook, it's in every story, we need that, but
Yeah.
just, yeah, I don't know if you have any general comments about literary publishing or something along those lines.
This might not be what you're asking, but one thing to do, and you probably do this, if you're interested in writing literary fiction, read a lot of literary fiction. When I'm writing, I tend to read more literary fiction than mysteries, just because I'm writing my own mystery and I don't want things to blur. I would just say, no, I can't say much.
Sure.
I wish I were more
It's a
intelligent.
very general question.
Yeah. Yeah. What is some good literary fiction that you've read lately?
Well, I'm reading a collection of Shirley Jackson. I'm reading, what else am I reading? Kate Chopin,
Oh, yeah.
The Awakening, and collection
Yeah.
of short stories. So I'm sort of around those, and I just picked up Joyce, Joyce Carol Oates' collection at the library. So looking at things from, that era, Flannery O'Connor.
Oh, God, I love her. And Eudora Welty.
I'm sorry?
Eudora Welty?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love Eudora.
Why I Live at the P.O. I love that story. There's a really good collection of short stories by Richard Peck. He wrote primarily for young adults. It's called, I think, Past Perfect, Present Tense. And he not only writes, it's full of these wonderful stories, he discusses each story and how he did it. And it's a nice class on literary fiction, literary short stories.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else?
I have a question.
Okay.
You're talking about hooking people from the first page.
Mm-hmm.
How do you hook people before that? So the back of the book or your marketing? How do
Oh.
you get people to
To-
kind of get hooked in the first place to take that?
So this would be after the book is sold and they're putting blurbs or jacket copy?
Yeah, or if you're self-published a book and so just trying to
Oh,
figure out
okay.
how to do that from my end where I'm kind of the one coming up with all that stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for how to go about that?
Read a bunch of
Yeah.
jacket copy. Can you get blurbs from other writers? That would be one thing, to send it to other people and ask them for people tend to be very kind about doing that kind of thing. These days, it's been my experience that publishers ask writers to write their own jacket copy, which I find scary. He's just written an 80,000 word book, and now they want you to put it on a jacket cover. It's like, oh, it's torture. But it's also nice because then you can pick up the points that you want. Basically, it's an elevator pitch. An elevator pitch is taking your 80,000 word story and distilling it into 25 really interesting words which you can do, but it's hard. But if you can practice doing that, that's also, when you do get your copy, show it to other people and get their thoughts on it, I guess. Because that is a tough one. And then there are people who pay no attention to that stuff. I quit reading jacket copy decades ago because so often it gives away some of the story. It's so irritating. But you kind of have to do that because there are people who like it.
Thank you.
I hope that helped. That's a jacket copy, blurbs, and synopses are so tough. Send me 3 pages or 7 pages or 20 pages about what your book's going to be about. And it's like, ah. Well, that's just a rough draft, a really rough draft, so. Anything else? Yeah.
I was wondering if you have any tips about how to find a good critique group,
Oh,
because like with my friends, so they're not really into the kind of stuff I like to write. I just have like one friend that's on the other side of the world who reads, so I think I need more people.
Solemn, are there any critique groups at the library these days? Or,
Yeah, there's a couple of groups that meet here that are local writing groups. I can see here, so there's like Red Herring. They meet here on Tuesday nights.
do they? That's cool. They used to meet at the Red Herring.
Yeah. Tuesday nights, I think at 7 p.m., but we can check the calendar, just let you know. There's also a group that formed from this writer's workshop. She's not here tonight, but her name is Louise. She is one of the attendees, and they meet via Zoom. And I know sometimes they do share like writing and give each other tips and advice. So yeah, so the group that meets here, you come back, I can always introduce Louise, and then the Red Herring group. And there's also Shut Up and Write, but that's just a group that gets together to like hold each other accountable and write. They don't really critique each other's work. But yeah, it's your Red Herring on Tuesday nights. Probably a good group to start with.
Red Herring they've been meeting for more than 30 years, haven't they? They're amazing. Obviously, people come and go. I belonged to them when we first moved back here from Tennessee, but then I got the job at the library and I had to work every Tuesday night, so I had to quit the Red Herring group. It's a variety of people, a variety of writers, but sometimes the critique group that I belong to right now, we've been meeting for 20 years. There are just 3 of us in the group. 2 of them are poets, and then I write mysteries, and one of the poets also writes children's picture books. Actually, they both have written children's picture books. One of them also writes children's novels in verse and biographies for children, and the other one writes academic stuff about folk tales. She's a like world-renowned expert on Beauty and the Beast variants. It's such a great group because we each have a different outlook on all of it, and we've been meeting for 20 years. It's great. And poets are amazing editors because they're so succinct. Sometimes they want to take too much out. No. Anyone else?
You mentioned that you were interested in writing mysteries for children, but you're in a rut with writing
Well,
mysteries for adults. I wondered if, and you also mentioned that you published short stories in the past, sort of starting out, it sounded like. Did you find that once you got into genre writing, that you sort of get stuck there within publishing, like that it's harder to then go and publish?
I haven't tried to publish beyond because it's a really nice rut to be in. I keep getting contracts for books. What a tragedy. And the short stories, I did start with short stories, mystery short stories, because I like mysteries. And because we had little children at home, it was easier to write something short. And I love short stories, and I'd like to write more of them, but while I was working full-time here, I was also sometimes writing 3 books a year. And it's like, that was, so I keep saying when I have time, and maybe that's this year. Maybe this year I think I've only got 1 book due, so maybe I'll have time to do some short stories. And I did start a children's mystery, but then I got a contract for an adult mystery, so I haven't gotten back to it. But now I also have grandchildren, so maybe I'll get back to that, and it will be a good book for grandchildren. There's just not enough time in the world. I'm not a very fast writer. There are people who write a whole lot faster than I do. I'm sort of a plotter. Anything else? Well, thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you for your interest.
Thank you. All right, well, thank you everyone for coming. A big thank you to Molly. Really good advice as always. We'll be back down here on Wednesday, August 21st, and that's going to be for an open mic night. So open mic night is a chance to share your poetry, flash fiction, spoken word. You can sign up to participate if you want to read your work or just stop by and listen. But we'll be down here on the 21st. Hope you can make it to that. Thank you.